It shows that the CIA's actions a decade ago are a stain on our value and on our history. The release of this 500-page summary cannot remove that stain, but it can and does say to our people and the world that America is big enough to admit when it's wrong.
A stain on our values and our history. That's how California Democrat Dianne Feinstein described the Senate report yesterday on the CIA's interrogation techniques. UC Berkeley law professor John Yoo joins us to talk about that report, its validity, and also to give us some insights into how the laws were actually constructed. John, you've had a day now to digest this report. It's huge. What did you learn from it?
Well, I'm sad to say I think it's fundamentally flawed. And there's two reasons for this. First, unlike any commission or committee report done on intelligence controversies in our history, this is the first one I know of that was carried out only by one party. Only Democrats participated in the report, no Republicans. If you look in the Church Commission report in 1975, Iran-Contra in 1987, those were bipartisan and they led to important reforms. That means, to me, initially that this was going to be suspect. But then, to compound that mistake, this committee went ahead and did its investigation without interviewing any of the individuals involved. It's all done.
But they looked at CIA files, John. Did they really need to talk to the CIA chiefs to understand what was going on?
Oh, yes. I mean, think about it this way. Suppose you were putting on a trial in a courtroom and the judge said, no witnesses. I'm just going to look at the documents. Right? Of course it would be unfair. The people you accuse should have a right to defend yourself. But here's a good example. The most important example and the most important test for the report should be what happened with bin Laden? How did we find bin Laden? So the CIA said initially, well, we found this, everyone agrees, we found a courier who led us to bin Laden. Now the committee report says, well, if you look at the documents, the name of the courier was in the CIA files before any of these interrogations took place. Yeah, that's true. And if you just look at the documents, that might lead you to think, oh, maybe they would have found him eventually. Although, how do we know that? But what's important is that if you don't talk to the CIA directors and the people involved, you wouldn't know that there are thousands of people in the files who were thought to be al-Qaeda members. There's no reason they would have picked this guy out.
Well, John, but the question is, did we torture people? Now, you served in the Bush administration in the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel. You were giving advice to the White House about these anti-terror laws as they were being constructed. How carefully were these laws constructed, and what did you see when you were in that office?
Well, first, I think that we went through a lot of study and careful work on these opinions about whether the law allowed these kinds of interrogation methods under the most difficult circumstances just a few months after the 9/11 attacks, while the Pentagon has still got a gigantic hole in the ground inside of it, and so does the World Trade Center. So we are just reeling from the attacks. We don't know very much about al-Qaeda, and there's a tremendous need for information to stop future attacks. And I think if you look at this report, taking out all of the biases in it, at least what you see is a record of the CIA going continuously back and forth with the Justice Department and the White House, not to execute some big conspiracy just for the sake of, I don't know, beating up prisoners for the fun of it. I guess that's what the Senate Democrats think the CIA was up to. It was they wanted to make sure everyone was on board, the White House, Justice Department, and Congress, in what they were doing.
So all of these agencies were talking to each other. Is it correct to say then, John, that there were hundreds of people involved, not just in the crafting of these laws, but also in the oversight of them?
At least dozens. I mean, you couldn't have maybe as many as you normally would like because it's classified and covert. We don't want to give the enemy any insight into what we're doing. But the claim in the report that people in Congress didn't know, that President Bush didn't know, that people in Justice Department didn't know, I think is untrue. I think that's just flat wrong. Flat wrong.
UC Berkeley's law professor John Yoo, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mary.